That's illegal," she shrieked, her voice a high-pitched, frantic whistle that cut through the still morning air. She was standing at the edge of my dock, a furious crimson that clashed violently with her pristine white tennis outfit. Her manicured hand rattling the heavy chain I had just locked around the gate that separated my property from the community beach. Dozens of people her community were gathered behind her, a sea of bewildered faces looking on as she jabbed a finger at me. "This is a public waterway. You can't just close off a public lake. We all have a right to be here." My heart was pounding, a wild, frantic drum against my ribs, but my hands were steady. I looked past her to the crowd, then back at her, a slow, determined smile spreading across my face. "Ma'am," I said, my voice low and calm, "this is not a public waterway. This is a private lake, and I'm the one who owns it. And that's when everything went wrong. Before I tell you what happened next, drop a comment. What would you do if this happened to you? And subscribe to HOA Files. My name is James, and my story, like so many of these HOA nightmares, started with a dream. Not a grand, extravagant dream, but a quiet, peaceful one. My family and I had been searching for years for a place to escape the hustle and bustle of city life, a place to decompress and reconnect. The property itself is nothing spectacular or rustic. 3-acre plot with a small cabin that's been in my family for generations. But the lake? It's special. A small, tranquil body of water that's hidden away in the mountains, surrounded by a ring of thick, old-growth pines. It was my grandfather's retreat, a place he would come to fish and just be. When he passed, he left the property to me. The deed was simple, a few pages of legal jargon that didn't make much sense to a city guy like me. But the important part was this. I owned the cabin, the land around it, and the lake itself. The deed spelled it out in no uncertain terms. I didn't know how rare that was. I didn't know how much trouble it would cause. The property was technically part of the Whispering Pines HOA, a small community of cabins that dotted the far side of the lake. My land was so far removed from the rest of the community that the rules had always felt more like suggestions. I paid my dues, attended a meeting once every 2 years, and generally kept to myself. Life was simple, predictable, and perfectly peaceful. But then, she moved in. Her name was Brenda, and she moved into the sleek, modern McMansion on the other side of the lake. A hulking monument of glass and steel that looked utterly out of place amidst the rustic charm of the other cabins. The first time I saw her was at the annual summer barbecue. She cornered me by the dessert table, her eyes scanning me from head to toe. A look of disapproval on her face. "You're the new guy, right?" she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "The one with the cabin on the far side of the lake?" "I've been here for a little over a year," I said, trying to be friendly. "And yeah, that's me. I'm James." She didn't offer to shake my hand. "Well, James, I just want to let you know that I'm the new head of the HOA. We have a lot of changes planned. A lot of improvements. We need to bring this community up to a higher standard." She gestured to the lawn, to the other cabins, to me. Her words weren't a promise of change. They were a thinly veiled threat. I just smiled, mumbled something about a good barbecue, and went to get more coleslaw. I had no idea I was staring into the eyes of the person who would become my own personal nightmare. The first hint of trouble was a letter. It's not an email, but a formal letter on thick HOA, embossed stationery. Violation notice, it read in bold black letters. Your dock is in violation of Bylaw 4.1, concerning color and material. All docks must be a uniform gray. Yours is a natural wood. My dock was old, weathered, and beautiful. A warm, natural wood that blended seamlessly with the trees. I called her, thinking it was a simple misunderstanding. "Hi, Brenda," I said, trying to keep my tone light and friendly. "I got a notice about my dock. I'm sorry, but it's an old dock. The wood is a natural color, and it's treated to protect it from the weather." "That's not my problem," she said, her voice flat. "Bylaws are bylaws. You have 7 days to paint it a uniform gray, or a fine will be issued." I felt a flash of irritation. 7 days? The paint would take weeks to order, and it's a huge dock. It's an entire process. "Not my problem," she repeated, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. Tick-tock, James. The fine was $100 a day, every day, until the dock was painted. I bit the bullet and had a team come out to paint the dock a sickly shade of gray that looked utterly unnatural against the clear blue water. It cost me a fortune, but I paid it. I had a busy life. I didn't have time for this nonsense. I hoped that would be the end of it. It wasn't. The next violation was for my boat. Violation 7.3. Your boat is a motorized vessel. The lake is a non-motorized zone. My little aluminum boat had a small 5-horsepower electric motor, a tiny little thing I used to get out to the middle of the lake. I had an old faded copy of the original HOA rules that said nothing about motorized boats. I refused to pay the fine. I wouldn't be bullied. That was my first mistake. The fines began to pile up. A letter for excessive noise pollution because of the sound of my wind chimes. A notice about my rainwater collection system being an unapproved structure. A fine for my security camera, which she claimed was a violation of privacy, despite it being pointed squarely at my own front door. I ignored them all, assuming she would eventually just give up. The letters became more frequent, the tone more aggressive. I was so busy with my work, with my life, that the letters began to feel like background noise, a distant buzz of a mosquito. I thought she would move on to someone else. I was wrong. One afternoon, I was at my cabin, working on a project in the garage, when I saw a car pull up to my driveway. A sleek black SUV. The passenger door opened, and a woman in a perfectly tailored blazer stepped out. It was Brenda. She was holding a clipboard, and she was striding purposefully toward me, a thin, tight smile on her face. "Excuse me," she said, her voice a cool, brittle thing. "I'm here for a routine inspection." "I don't think so," I said, my voice as calm as I could make it. "You're not coming on my property." "You have no right." She laughed, a short, humorless little puff of air. "Oh, but I do. James, the bylaws state that the HOA has the right to inspect all properties to ensure compliance." "I'm not part of your HOA, Brenda," I said, a slow smile spreading across my face. "I'm not a member. My property isn't in your boundaries." Her smile faltered for a second. "Of course you are. Everyone on the lake is part of the HOA. It's a requirement. It's not," I said, and a new triumphant thought occurred to me. I had to look at my deed again. I went back inside, grabbed a copy, and brought it back out. I said, pointing to a small, nearly invisible section of the map. "My property is not in your boundaries. Your line ends right here, right before my land starts. And besides," I said, holding up the deed, "it says right here that the lake and every inch around it belongs to me." "It's a private lake, Brenda. I own it." She was speechless. Her face went pale, a sickening white that made her look like a ghost. She stumbled back, her eyes wide with a dawning horror. I felt a rush of vindication so powerful it made me dizzy. I was right. I owned the lake. All of it. The entire body of water was mine. She had been threatening me, fining me, and demanding access to my private property. And all along, she had no right to do any of it. But she wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. A few days later, a certified letter arrived. This one was different. This wasn't from the HOA. It was from a law firm I didn't recognize. The letter stated that due to my continued non-compliance and the mounting, unpaid fines, the HOA had exercised its right to place a lien on my property and was now initiating a foreclosure. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just harassment anymore. This was a move to take my home. I had no idea how she had pulled it off. But she had found a way to weaponize the HOA bylaws, turning them into a financial guillotine. I was so angry, so utterly hopeless that I couldn't even think straight. I paced my living room, the letter a crumpled ball in my hand. It seemed I was beaten. I called an old friend who was a lawyer, explained the situation. He told me that my case was strong, but that getting an injunction to stop the foreclosure would take time. Time I didn't have. The foreclosure was in 30 days. I felt a sense of despair. She was going to win. She was going to prove that she could do whatever she wanted, and there was nothing I could do to stop her. Then I remembered something. Something I had completely forgotten. The old deed. The one my grandfather had given me. It wasn't just a simple piece of paper. It was a complex, multi-page document that had been passed down for generations. I knew I had to find it. It was a long shot, but it was my only hope. I spent hours in my attic, rummaging through dusty boxes filled with old tax returns, forgotten photo albums, and Christmas decorations. Just as I was about to give up, I found it. A thick manila envelope, yellowed and brittle with age. Stamped on the front in faded ink, Thorn Property, DEED 1948. I ripped it open, my hands trembling. I flipped through the pages, my eyes scanning the fine print, the clauses, the rules. My heart was a drum in my chest, and there it was, in a small, nearly invisible clause. A part of the deed that stated that the land and the lake were to be held in perpetuity by the Thorn family, and shall not, at any time, be subjected to a lien foreclosure, or any other claim by any other party, private or public. I felt a rush of vindication so powerful it made me dizzy. She couldn't touch my land. She couldn't touch my lake. She was a fraud. All of it. The fines, the threats, the lien. It was all a lie. She was exposed. I went to the community center, showed the deed to the old lady at the desk, Martha, who looked at it with wide, shocked eyes. She confirmed that the HOA had no right to my land. She told me Brenda had a community meeting planned for the next day, a big one, at the community beach, where she was going to announce the foreclosure on my land. I spent the next few hours meticulously documenting everything. I took pictures of the deed, highlighted the key clauses, and created a document detailing all of Brenda's fabricated rules and fines. I went to a local print shop and made hundreds of copies. The next morning, I woke up early. The air was crisp and cold, the lake still and glassy. It was the perfect day for a community meeting. I drove down to my dock, a heavy-duty chain and a thick padlock in my hand. I walked up to the gate that separated my dock from the community beach, and I locked it. I stood there, a quiet sentinel, waiting. I didn't have to wait long. At around 11 o'clock, the first cars started to arrive, a dozen of them. Then a few more. And then a bus, a big white tour bus with Caterers of the Pines written on the side. My heart was pounding, a wild, frantic drum against my ribs, but my hands were steady. I saw Brenda drive up in her SUV, her face a mask of triumphant glee. She got out of her car, saw me standing by the gate, and her smile faltered. The hundreds of people gathered behind her, a sea of confused faces, looked on. "What are you doing, James?" She shrieked, her voice high and shrill. "Unlock this gate right now. My guests are on the way." "Guests?" I asked, my voice low and calm. I thought this was a community meeting. She looked at the crowd, then back at me, her face turning a furious crimson. She had lied to the community. This wasn't a community event at all. It was a private party she had planned without anyone's permission. Out on a part of the lake she had no right to claim as her own. That's illegal. She shrieked, her voice a high-pitched, frantic whistle that cut through the still morning air. She was standing at the edge of my dock, a furious crimson that clashed violently with her pristine white tennis outfit, her manicured hand rattling the heavy chain I had just locked around the gate that separated my property from the community beach. Dozens of people her community were gathered behind her, a sea of bewildered faces looking on as she jabbed a finger at me. "This is a public waterway. You can't just close off a public lake. We all have a right to be here." My heart was pounding, a wild, frantic drum against my ribs, but my hands were steady. I looked past her to the crowd, then back at her, a slow, determined smile spreading across my face. "Ma'am," I said, my voice low and calm, "this is not a public waterway. This is a private lake, and I'm the one who owns it." And that's when everything went wrong. She wasn't just a liar. She was a fraud. 150 people were standing in the middle of a dirt road, waiting for a party that was never going to happen. I watched as the caterers, the band, and the photographer all began to pull up behind the crowd, their faces confused. I stepped forward, holding the old deed in my hand. "Everyone," I said, my voice clear and strong. "I have something to show you. Brenda has been lying to you. This is not a community event. She has no right to use this lake. Her new bylaws are a fraud. This entire thing is a scam." I began to read from the old deed, the clause about private ownership, the clause about the immunity from a lien or foreclosure. As I spoke, the crowd erupted. People were talking, whispering, looking at Brenda with a new, suspicious gaze. She was cornered. She looked like a rat trapped in a cage. Her husband, a quiet, unassuming man, walked up to her, his face a mask of mortification, and began to whisper in her ear. She was exposed, defeated, and she had no one to blame but herself. The moral of the story is simple. It's one I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. Never, ever assume you're beaten. And never underestimate the power of a man who just inherited a family cabin with a very old, very powerful deed. I have a long road ahead of me, a new battle to fight. The lawsuit to get her to pay for the fines she issued, the fight to have her removed from the HOA board for good. But for the first time in a long time, I'm not afraid. I'm ready. Because Brenda's petty tyranny was just the beginning. I've been a target before, and I'll be a target again. But next time, they won't even see me coming.